Jim, thank you very much. That was, it's an honor for me to be introduced by you. And of course, Jim knows, and as he said, we are very good friends, but I also hold Jim in the same regard. Very accomplished career with all of the work you've done nationally and internationally. So thank you very much for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here at Lawrence. I'm here regularly. I see our president here, Dr. Walker, and we are here with the doctor, and because I'm on the board of trustees at the university, so I do come to regular meetings and committee meetings as well. And I always enjoy coming back to Lawrence because, listen, this is where I got my education. I feel very connected to the university. I deal a lot with your dean, Glenn Leroy, and he also serves actively on our board at AIA Michigan. So we very much appreciate his time and what you do for us also, Glenn. And Glenn is also our regional director, so he goes to Washington quite a bit, and that's a commitment in itself. You know, when Don asked me to speak, he says, hey, this is about not just about architecture, but it's about sort of your career and the sort of entrepreneurial spirit that you seem to have, and could you talk about that career and the things that sort of formed that and really brought us to where we are today. And you know, it starts, I think, you have to sort of look back at your background. And you know, I always look at the way I grew up myself as a young man. And I grew up in a family that was a business-oriented family. In fact, not only my family was very business-oriented, but my wife's family was also very business-oriented. And you know, we used to sit around, we still do, we sit around for Sunday dinners, and we're really not talking about sports, we're talking about business. I mean, these are the things, the kind of discussions that we have. This is the kind of spirit that our family has always had. I happen to be Chaldean. My wife, Michelle, who's here sitting next to Dino, another good friend, is also Chaldean. And you know, the Chaldeans, our origins are from Iraq, and my father came to this country back in 1929 during the Great Depression, and he built a very good business for himself, and my father-in-law also built a very good business for himself. So, you know, we sit around on Sunday afternoons and we buy and sell half the city of Detroit, you know, back and forth between all of us. But it's a good experience, you know, and it's really that sort of roots and upbringing that, you know, causes us to think this way and talk this way. And even for our own children sit around the dining room tables, and we have these sort of discussions as well. So we hope that they will have that sort of business skill and entrepreneurial sense that you know, we want to see instilled into them. And in fact, even when I was in high school, I was interested in architecture, but you know, I was interested in design, and I wanted to find out about design, and I didn't have any design classes at all, in fact, and the first classes I had were when I came here to Lawrence. I had actually applied to the 3 different architectural schools. I looked at University of Michigan, and I looked at U of D, and at Lawrence. And at the end, I selected Lawrence because I really appreciated the fact that Lawrence got me involved, or got us involved as students, in the architectural curriculum in the first year. The other 2 programs, you went for sort of your general studies, you know, your math and physics and other studies, and I wanted to find out right away if I was interested in architecture. You know, I was kind of anxious. Getting out of high school, I was going into college, and I said, you know, I want to know, I don't want to find out after my 3rd year of school that I enter the architecture program and it's not what I thought it was going to be. Another aspect of for myself being an architect was I felt that I could own my own business, and that's going back to my roots of, you know, growing up in a business family, that I really felt I could open my own business as an architect, and as Jim said, hang my own shingle and have my own firm. And that was very important to me. There are some professions, quite frankly, that don't always offer you that opportunity, but architecture was one that I felt comfortable that I could open my own business, because that was an important goal of mine that I always felt I was going to do. And of course, I was also interested in the practice of architecture. Now, Our firm really is a firm that is somewhat of a boutique firm, and all of our work is in the private sector. We don't really do institutional work or government work. Everything we do is in the private sector. And again, that kind of goes a little bit, I think, towards that entrepreneurial spirit, because the kind of clients we have are owners themselves who have businesses, developers who own their own developments and practices. And so, you know, just being surrounded by those kinds of people helps, I think, build that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And Don, when we were talking about what to say, Don said, you know, maybe, you know, you ought to talk about some of the sort of skills that are important and, you know, some of the business skills I think that are important today. And, you know, I would say, first of all, you have to be a good listener. And, you know, when a client comes to us, I really pay attention to what that client is saying. And I really try to put myself in those clients' shoes and understand why they're coming to us. Because for us to be successful for them, I have to understand their agenda and their goals. And you know, I would say that listening skills are very difficult for a lot of people today. You know, a lot of us, especially as architects, we want to get started on something right away as a designer. And you know, you've got to slow down and sit back and try to really, you know, make sure you understand what the big picture is and what the owner is trying to accomplish. And then, of course, you know, you have to evaluate the situation. And I would say the last thing, another important business skill that's very important, and we even tell our children this, is that we have to be good communicators. You know, in any business you're in, communication skills are fundamental. Not just as an architect, I think in anything. And, you know, I know today we're in a very technical world. Everything is done through computers and laptops and email and all other forms of communication. But there's nothing more important than having a one-on-one dialogue with an owner, a client. I have to do a lot of evening presentations where we go to city halls and for municipal work when we have to get site plan approvals and variances. And you know, you have to have your presentation prepared, and you have to have good communication skills, and that's even important with an owner as well. You need to really make sure that you know, you're getting along, you're having a good dialogue, and that they're comfortable with you and you're comfortable with them. What I also the way I've sort of pulled some images together is to show you a variety of different projects that we've done over the years. And I thought what's important is, you know, I'm going to show you lots of nice pictures, I hope, or at least I think they're nice pictures and beautiful buildings. But really the story behind them is, you know, how did they get fabricated? Why do they look the way they do? You know, we do residential work for owners, and they have one type of agenda. We do multifamily work for some people, and there's a different agenda. Many times those projects are done with developers. And then we do commercial work, and the commercial work has its own agenda. If it's a retail building, and of course Jim has done a lot of retail work, and you know, it's all about sales and making a successful business for that retail environment. If it's a restaurant, it's about the success of that restaurant and making people feel comfortable in that atmosphere and having a dining experience. If it's an office building, it may be a business environment that they're trying to portray and have a successful environment for their clients or for their employees. So, you know, always we look at what drives the motivation, and that helps us drive the design. And again, if we have a successful project for the owner, then it's successful for us. And that's how we measure our success. If the project was successful for them, then we did the right thing. And you know, as architects, we take our business fairly seriously. You know, we do buildings that are here for a long, long time, hundreds of years, hopefully. And you know, we'll do one building or one project at a time, but really as an aggregate, they add up to building cities. So, you know, the role an architect plays is very important in our communities today. And for those of you who are architects, and I know some of you are, the profession is very rewarding, and hopefully you build a legacy of beautiful buildings that will go on and help serve the community and improve people's lives. The other aspect I'm going to touch on too, and you'll see when I go to some of these slides, is through our architectural practice, we also ourselves got into some development. And you know, that was sort of a natural extension for us because, you know, after all, we learned about architecture and real estate and design and construction and costs and money and budgets, and we've learned to do this for other owners, so we started doing it for ourselves along the way. And we've had the opportunity to partner with some wonderful people that we've done these buildings with as well. And in some cases, in fact, we used to take our fees and we would apply our fees towards our equity into the project. In other cases, we would just put equity right into the project because we believed in it. So again, you know, it's about building relationships. We've had clients of ours who've then become partners of ours. Of course, we do it with our own family members, where we're partners with our own family. And we've even been partners and had some very successful projects with some of the general contractors that we've done business with. So you never know where the opportunities are going to come from and who one day may be a client and tomorrow may be a partner. Or one day may be a colleague and tomorrow may be a partner. So, you know, you always need to keep your options open because those opportunities exist. And it's all about, you know, seeing the opportunities in front of you and looking for the rewards. Because, you know, as an entrepreneur, there's always that sort of risk and reward balance, right? You know, I mean, there's certainly, for some people, you have to take the challenge and there's some risk. But with that risk, hopefully comes some reward. And, you know, you've just got to be sort of smart about how it all works for you. And hopefully, you know, as we sort of get a little, as we mature a little bit, you know, you become a little more, as time goes on, a little more adverse to risk. But I always tell myself, hey, we've got to do it like we did it when we were younger. And, you know, sometimes you start to think that you want to start protecting a little bit of everything you've got. And of course you do. But at the same time, you do want to still be aggressive and be out there and make sure that we're continuing to do projects. So with that, let me see if I'm going to be able to maybe dim the lights a little bit. And I'm just going to talk through some of these different projects. And what I decided to do is start with some of the residential projects. And I'm not going to really talk a whole lot about the architectural details. I just want to show you, you know, what sort of motivates our clients and the kind of projects we do. This happens to be a very fine residence in Franklin. It's for Rob and Marcy Orley. When they came to us, they said they were very interested in Voiset and Lutyens. These were architects, sort of a turn of the century, who were popular in England. So you see the buildings out of stucco and slate and very substantial. And you know, again, their agenda was they wanted a very fine private home. So we were trying to be good listeners and just, you know, make sure that we carry out the kind of details. They were collectors of art and antiques, and you can see the quality of some of the furnishings in the space, as well as just the quality of the construction and the moldings and what sort of atmosphere that we could deliver for them. This is just another view of all these series of gables that really sort of mark the house and start to define the architecture. And then just another view of the dining room. By the way, they have a very large family. This is a dining room that they would be able to hold 16 people, and they wanted a fireplace, and so they, you know, again, listening to our clients and making sure that we're fulfilling their sort of agenda. And then typically most of our residential, and we tend to do the residential at the fairly high end. I mean, that home was a very expensive home that I showed you. But in some cases, we've done some what we call speculative work, where we've worked with developers to do some very fine homes as well. Again, the level that we're dealing at, for instance, this home, when we sold it, was for about $4.5 million. So, you know, we're dealing at a fairly high level, but this happens to be over in Turtle Lake in Bloomfield Hills. And it's actually backs up to a lake, but just a very fine craftsmanship and being very authentic with the details. When we look at the architecture, we try to be very true to a particular style. And this house happened to be a little bit of a shingle style aesthetic, and we try to be very sort of authentic to that. And this happens to be another spec house that is also an expensive home that we did around the Hunt Club, also in Bloomfield Hills. And again, this was a different developer actually that we did a series of homes for over there. And these homes have sold. In fact, this home has sold a couple of times. And of course, each time it sells for more money. But this also happens to be a shingle style, but we call it sort of a gambrel roof, sort of that barn kind of structure roof. That's the main body of the house. And then again, just some of the classic interiors. We really try to, and this is one of our strengths, by the way, as a firm. Jim had mentioned briefly that we've always sort of concentrated on interiors. That happens to be one of our areas that we like to focus on. So in many cases, we're doing the furniture, we're doing the lighting, we're doing the fabrics, we're even doing the artwork selection for many of our projects. And in the same development, this just happens to be another house, a little more of what we would call sort of an American farmhouse on this development, just a very simple straight axes house that has hip roofs and window over window kind of architecture. But, again, another successful home. So this is some of the speculative work. And what we do in these cases is we really try to understand what owners and buyers are looking for today at the high end. And we know that intuitively because we already do a lot of high-end homes. So we know what sells. The kitchens are very important, the quality of the cabinets, the master baths, the master bedrooms. Those are all very important spaces. And then, especially in these sort of, I'll say, more classic architectural styles, things like moldings and woodwork, wood floors throughout. All of those are important elements that we know buyers are looking for. So, we take our experience and we try to, introduce it into our projects because we want it to be successful for our developer when they go to sell the home. And then just moving ahead, this happens to be actually another private home that we did. This is actually one of the largest homes we've ever done. And I'm going to show you a series of just parts of the home. But this is actually an owner who travels all around the world. He's very worldly. And he had talked about a conservatory. So we actually went to Belgium and we did a lot of research on the conservatories. And we had this conservatory made in Belgium. They actually built it in their factory per our design. And you see, when you see how the Europeans work in the factories, you see the white lab coats. That's exactly how these guys are. The floors are impeccable, very clean and pristine. And they actually build the entire conservatory in the factory, fabricate it, they dismantle it, they number all of the pieces, because these things are all custom made. In fact, this is all wood construction, by the way. This is not steel. And then they put it in a container, they ship it across the pond, and they bring their people from Belgium, and they actually installed the conservatory back again. Of course, they put some Belgian beer in the front of the container for us, just as a, so we remember where they're from. This owner actually, there's two garages. This is one garage, is sort of a detached building, and above it there is an apartment for a live-in couple who sort of managed the house for them. So of course we had to make sure that we took care of the live-in couple because he said, I don't want them ever to leave, so let's build them a nice quarters. And this is just a detail. There's actually a gymnasium. This is a gymnasium, and this is just part of the gymnasium. You can see it's very steep, sort of copper roofs, and there's a lot of stone and stucco. And the gymnasium, he uses it for his family because he's very much into sports and athletics. But he also, what is important, he does a lot of entertaining, and he's very active in his community. And he holds a lot of fundraisers for his community. So we actually have chandeliers in the gymnasium that come down He's had a custom rug made for the gymnasium that rolls out. And one side of the gymnasium is all glass, and it overlooks a private wooded site that's about 10 acres. So, you know, we broke the building down into a lot of components because we didn't want this building to be too large. There's actually 4 different buildings that make up this house, and they're connected by walkways, and in one case it's connected by a tunnel. And this is just another detail shot. You can see the different layers of materials where we used Mankato stone at the base, and then there's a band of stucco, and then the roofs are all slate. And in fact, we used even slate on some of the walls and copper on some of the walls as well. So just trying to create a very interesting palette. This owner is very worldly. A lot of very important people come to his home. You know, he's trying to portray a certain image and have a certain environment for his family. And part of our goal was, even though this is a very large home, none of the spaces in the house are too large. In fact, it's very comfortable. You know, you've been to some very large homes maybe, and the spaces are like hotel lobbies, and they're huge, and they really become very impersonal. Here, the spaces are small, and that's why we tried to break the masses down of the house, because he wanted it to not appear too big. So that's, you know, those are some of the things that we try to do for our owners, and we try to be very good listeners. And by the way, this gentleman in fact, all of our clients usually become our friends, and this gentleman's become a very good friend of ours, and he's just a wonderful person, and he's a young man. He's younger than me. In fact, we had to get the house done for his 40th birthday. It shows you how old he is. As we graduated from doing residential, we started doing also multifamily work, and this is called the Merrill Park Townhouses. This is a project that we started to get involved in some development ourselves. So this is a project that we did actually in 1980, you know, so it's about 22 years ago that we did this project. And this was one of the first projects where we did these sort of row houses or brownstones in Birmingham. And we actually went to Boston and we went to Philadelphia to study the row houses and the brownstones to make sure that we really understood the qualities of those buildings, because we wanted to see a successful building in downtown Birmingham. This happens to be on Merrill Street. And from this project, a whole district really evolved. And it's they call it the Townhouse District in Birmingham. And we did probably 4 or 5 other townhouse developments since this project. But this one was the catalyst. And we've had many owners go through these now. I mean, these have sold several times, and every time they've sold for more money. And so it was a very successful development. I still remember this development. We sold one immediately from a scale model that we built. And then the second one we sold shortly after, and then we sold the third one. I says, man, this is going to be a home run. We were looking for land to do another project. You know, I see Ben smiling, but we were ready to go. And then the Gulf War hit. That was the first Gulf War. This is back at George Bush Sr. And all of a sudden, the real estate market stopped. Not unlike what happened a few years ago here. Maybe not as deep, but the market stopped. And we sat for about 1.5 years and didn't sell anything. So our partner really made all the money at the end of the deal, and our partner was the bank, right? We had to pay all the money back to the bank. But it was still, at the end of the day, we felt a very successful development and a good learning curve for us. And from that, we were able to, you know, parlay that into other very good projects. And these are just, you can see there were 7 different brownstones, all attached, but they had the same sort of vernacular and flavor, but each one had its unique details. In fact, this unit that you're looking at, the middle unit, actually Gino Rossetti lives there. That's his unit, which he bought. We didn't do it for him originally. He bought it from another owner. And these are just, this is a detail looking through the front door, but you see again sort of the palette of materials and the quality of the architecture that we're trying to introduce. And these units are fairly narrow. They're only about 25 feet wide, actually 24 feet wide, wall to wall. But you know, they had some good depth. We had high ceilings, and again, we were putting in the kind of detail in the architecture that we knew buyers were looking for in terms of moldings and cabinets and furnishings for the brownstones. A project that's a little more recent that we also did in Birmingham. This is in what they call the Rail District of Birmingham that we were very active in and we helped sort of formulate. And the Rail District used to be an industrial district in Birmingham, and it's they call it the rail district because the train tracks run right along there. Maybe some of you know where the Big Rock Chop House is. That's the old train station of Birmingham. And this happens to be right next door to it. And we did this with Norm LePage, and the general contractors were the partners with us, and Norm had a partner as well. And we call this District Lofts. And you know, we actually went to Norm when we saw an opportunity, and Norm has done a fantastic job with his chop house. And we said, Norm, you've just got a big surface parking lot that's not being utilized. I mean, you're parking cars in a surface lot, but you're sitting on valuable land. And we said, you know, this rail district, which used to be Birmingham's industrial area, has really been starting to turn. We did a series of different buildings. We took some old industrial buildings, and we've made offices, we've made dental offices. We did a swim school in one of the buildings. And Norm says, you know, I think you guys have a great idea. We should develop it. So there's 2 buildings. We call them the District Lofts. Each building has 24 loft condominiums, and that's how we designed it originally. But again, this was a situation where we built the first building, and then we had the financial collapse here in 08 and 09, and we had a hard time selling the buildings. So we said, well, we're going to get them all finished, and we're going to convert them to apartments for lease. And actually that turned out to be the best thing we could have done, because all of a sudden the apartment market started to really grow in popularity. People were not buying as much anymore, but they were certainly wanting to rent, and there was not a lot of good apartment products in the Birmingham area, and especially these that were new apartments that we could design and develop and offer them for sale. So in fact, now we've got a waiting list. For the first 24 that we did, we've got a waiting list probably 3 deep. And I mean, as soon as one becomes available, within 5 minutes we put it on a site that we have of all of the owners, and it's grabbed. I mean, that's how popular these are. And the architecture, we sort of made it a little bit, you know, if I go back to that first image, it's sort of meant to emulate what could have been almost like a warehouse-like building. You know, you can see the big sort of bays of glass and the divided lights, so like the steel sash windows. And we divided it with a base and then a body and a top, and the base is like a cast stone, and then the body is brick, and then the top is standing seam metal siding. And that's just a detail of one of the balconies. And then these are the interiors, just very open and bright, nice high ceilings, hardwood floors. Again, introducing a certain amount of quality, but keeping it fairly open and simple in its sort of architecture and aesthetic. And another project that we got involved in is one that is on Forest Street. In fact, this is where the Forest Grill restaurant is. We're partners in this development as well, and this is a project that we had worked with general contractors in Birmingham for about 20 years that we knew very, very well. In fact, 2 different contractors who were friends as well. And we said, hey, this looks like an opportunity. We bought the site and we built this building. And so this is where I said colleagues of yours can become your partners, and this is a real example. So this happens to be a mixed-use building where the first floor is retail, and we've got the Forest Grill restaurant. The second floor, we've got offices. And on the third floor, we have, well, what started out again to be condominiums. It was about just after District Lofts, we started this project. And again, we converted these to apartments. And again, we've got a waiting list for these apartments. And this is just a view of one of the apartments. These apartments are fairly small. You know, these apartments are actually about 1,200 square feet, but we're getting about $2,500, $2,600 a month in rent. So we're actually doing better from a rental standpoint than we would have done if we had sold them. And we're going to own the property now. If you sell it, obviously we would have sold the top floor and just owned the second floor and the first floor, but now we still have ownership in the entire building. And here you see how it looks as you look down the street. Worked out pretty nice. The city came and paved the street for us as soon as the project was done, so we appreciated that. And this building is fully occupied, and in fact, we've got a waiting list for these apartments as well. This happens to be the Forest Grill, and you know, again, just using the resources and the connections you have. When we started this project, the city of Birmingham started doing the bistro licenses, and we said, hey, we think we can get a bistro license for this project. In fact, we thought it was just going to be retail on the ground floor, but we started thinking about getting a bistro license. At first, the neighbors were opposed to it, but then we started working on them and having a series of meetings. And what we did was we brought in a friend of ours who's a chef. His name is Brian Polson, who's probably the most renowned chef in Michigan, certainly nationally known. And we've done work with Brian. We did Brian's house. We did his restaurant in Milford. It was called Five Lakes Grill. And we said, Brian, we got an opportunity for you to do a restaurant in Birmingham. We've got a building. We think we can get you a bistro license. Would you be interested? And you know, one thing led to the next. So again, this is just using your connections, past clients, bringing them in. We partnered with Brian, and we created the Forest Grill. And when it first opened up, it became Restaurant of the Year from Our Magazine. And then the second year, the Detroit News gave it Restaurant of the Year as well. And that's the first time in history a restaurant got back-to-back Restaurant of the Year. It's a very fine restaurant, very busy. And of course, this is a case where we did all of the interiors. By the way, this is a green building. It's a silver LEED building. And we worked with Brian on all of the interior details. And this is just a view of the bar as well. Moving on to another project that we're very proud of. It's called the Royal Park Hotel in Rochester. Maybe many of you have been there or have seen it. Very fine facility. We did it with Frank Rewald. And again, this is a very similar situation. We've done a lot of projects with Frank Rewald. We did the Townsend Hotel with Frank Rewald in Birmingham. We did a series of commercial buildings with him. And they had a gentleman by the name of Bill McCardle who wanted to do a hotel with them. And Frank says, well, we got the guy who's going to do the hotel. We're going to go to Victor, and he's going to work with us. And one thing led to the next, and Frank says, hey, Victor, do you want to participate with us? Do you guys want to be involved in it? We said, sure. And this is another example where we parlayed some of our fees into the ownership of this hotel. So we are partners, and in fact, there's about 16 partners, and they got a few other participants to all be partners in putting this hotel together. And really, it's become the landmark property in Rochester. And I mean, we have 165 rooms. It's sort of in this English stately architecture, arts and crafts, we would call it. And the interiors are all beautifully detailed. This happens to be a view down like one of the what we call the gallery hall, and it's right on the Paint Creek, and all those windows overlook the Paint Creek. And we have outdoor dining and, as well along that creek. And that's just a view of the main entrance, the portico share. And we have a lot of celebrities who stay at this hotel and a lot of basketball teams. People who are usually over out at the Palace will stay there because it's out in that area. And since we learned, we became experts on conservatories, we said we're going to do a conservatory for the hotel. So we went back to the same Belgian company that we knew. And this one, if you remember the first conservatory I told you, it had a little more of a solid roof, although part of it was glass. This one is all glass. And again, this is all wood construction. And the way a conservatory works is, you know, the conservatories were developed before air conditioning really came about. And the English had developed a conservatory concept where they would have windows down low that would open up, and the air would come in cool. And as the air heats up through convection, the windows at the top open up, and the air just goes out. And through convection, very much the way a chimney works, you get this sort of natural drafting effect. And that drafting is just, even though it's outdoor air, it just cools you down because you have air passing over you. So that's really the way the conservatories work. So these windows up on top all open up, and we do beautiful receptions here. They do weddings here. They do, we have a garden just outside of it, and sometimes they'll have a wedding ceremony out there and a reception inside. Other kinds of commercial projects, this happens to be, in fact, this is Michigan First Credit Union, and I know they're associated, Lewis, with the university here as well. And we got to know the CEO and the chairman is Michael Polis. This is over on Evergreen Road, not too far from the school here. And they came to us to do their headquarters. They have about 10 different credit unions. This actually used to be the old Detroit Teachers Credit Union, so it has a long history, and today it's called the Michigan First Credit Union. And they are very successful and very strong. And we did their headquarters building, and you know, when the owner came to us, he said we wanted a building that looks strong. We want it to be modern. You know, we're a financial institution. We want to portray the fact that it's very solid and stable. And when he first came to us, he wanted all the parking in the front. We said to the chairman, you know, we should be putting the parking in the back, and we'll just put a little bit of parking in the front so that we can really make the building be much more urban and address the streets. So we were able to move the building forward. And if you've ever been here, or if you're a member here, there is a very, very large drive-through facility. In fact, they've got 22 drive-through lanes in the back of this building. In fact, we were the largest in the country when we did it. And they're actually tandem drive-through lanes where they do 2 people at a time through those drive-throughs. And it's really amazing. They do a tremendous amount of volume. And that was just an effort really trying to figure out all the logistics of that in itself. And these are just some of the details that, this is just a detail shot of the front canopy and the entry where we got this sort of glass canopy, and it signifies what the main entrance is. And this is a sort of an atrium space, so when you first walk in, you get this very dramatic space. And at night, it really becomes a lighthouse. It's a beacon. It's all lit up, so people drive by and they see the credit union as a sort of a landmark building, and that's what the owner wanted. In fact, they were looking at sites, and this site happened to be, it ends up in Lathrop Village. And the village is not a big community, it's a small community, but boy, they love this credit union. This is like, you know, their landmark building for the community. And that's just another detail shot, sort of a dusk shot. You can see how the atrium starts to light up, and as it gets a little bit darker, it really becomes a focal point. And really that's what the owner wanted. You know, we wanted to make sure that we showed a building that had that was the appearance of being very solid and strength, and you know, that they were a financial institution. And he also wanted to have a modern look and an urban look, and also have that focal point. Moving along to some other projects that we've done in Birmingham, and you know, our office has always been in Birmingham. We've had several different offices in Birmingham, so naturally we do a lot of work in our own backyard. But the Birmingham Theater was pretty much almost shut down. It was dark most of the time. They were running just live films, or not live films, they had just live shows there. And it was one big auditorium. And so we worked with the Illich family, and they said we want to do a multiplex, and they divided. We actually took what was the volume of the entire one big auditorium. We inserted a floor, and we put theaters above and theaters below, and we created 9 theaters in this one volume. And we were the first ones to do stadium seating in the state of Michigan. It was the first time that stadium seating was coming in, and so we introduced the stadium seating. And we did all of the interiors. We put escalators in. We really wanted to bring it back to sort of the glory days of Hollywood. And this project really became a catalyst for the rejuvenation of the nightlife of downtown Birmingham, because Birmingham was going through a lot of changes. And they had introduced a plan. They called it the 2016 plan. It was a 20-year plan that they hired Andreas Dewani, who's an internationally renowned planner, to come into Birmingham and help with some new zoning and a new master plan to encourage development and to spur on development. And one of the catalysts of the project, or of the 2016 plan, was to make sure that we introduced a lot of residential. So we started doing a lot of residential in town, buildings like the Willits and some of the earlier buildings that I showed you, and some of the townhouses. And then the Birmingham Theater came, and we did the Birmingham Theater. And after the Birmingham Theater, we started to see restaurants and nightlife and much more activity. So one project can really be a catalyst in a community, and this was that project when we did the Birmingham Theater. It was It was a real treat and a joy, and it was a real aggressive schedule, but it all worked out, and is still a very successful theater today. And from that, the Palladium Theater came. And in fact, Jim's firm worked on the Palladium. We did some real early studies on the interiors, but Jim did the Palladium Theater. And from the Birmingham Theater, the Birmingham Theater was so successful that other developers from New York saw that success, and they said, we're going to do an even larger theater, a bigger multiplex, which it was, and the Illich family got involved in that too. So, you know, from one success led to another one. And then just moving on to another type of commercial project. This is ABC Harley Davidson that we did in Waterford Township. We did it for an owner that we met at another opening that we did years before for a nightclub, and we did that when we were a little bit younger. It was called Industry in Pontiac. And this owner at the opening, his name was Ed, and he said, Victor, he was an older gentleman, and he said, one day I'm going to do a project, and I've got something in mind, I'm going to call you. And about 8 years later, he did call me. And he says, I don't know if you remember meeting you, and I said, yes, I do. And he said, I've got this Harley Davidson dealership. This guy, by the way, is a real entrepreneur. He owns about half of Clarkston, quite frankly, and he has multiple businesses. He's also been in the food business, and he does a lot of real estate developments. He owns the Bank of Clarkston, and he owns several different Harley Davidson dealerships. But he owned this one. It was a very old tire dealership, but it was very successful. And this was at the days when, to get a Harley Davidson, you used to have to wait. You have to put your name on a reservation system. There used to be a lottery, and you would sometimes have to wait 2 years to be able to get in line to buy one of the bikes. They were that much in demand. And because there was only so much production, because they were still made in Milwaukee. They hadn't built the second factory. They had the one original factory. And if you know the story about Harley Davidson, it's really one of the American stories, you know, one of the great American stories. If you talk about business and entrepreneurship, that Harley Davidson is that story. So again, we try to really put ourselves in the shoes of our owner. And when we first met the first time with Ed, we went and walked the dealership. We sat down in his office, and he said, well, I'd like to hire you to do it. And I said, this is exciting. I love this, different kinds of projects like this. This is what kind of gets us excited. It turns us on, gets our juices going. And I said, Ed, I gotta tell you something. And he said, what's that? I said, I've never driven a Harley Davidson. And he says, I know that. And I said, how did you know? He goes, because you don't drive a Harley, you ride a Harley. I said, okay, you got me. So that was my first lesson on Harley Davidsons. But from that, you know, we actually went with him to several of the dealers' conventions, and we went to the Harley Davidson headquarters, and we really wanted to learn all about Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson's got this book. It's about this thick. It's called the Big Book of Harley. You know, it's a whole biography of the whole history of the company, and we really immersed ourselves into that. And what we wanted to do was make sure that we were being true to the spirit of Harley, because the people who have their bikes here live Harley Davidson. I mean, there isn't a bigger brand recognition in America, I think, than the Harley Davidson. That bar and shield. I mean, people put Harleys in their living room. People have Harley tattooed on their body. I mean, that shows you the commitment of the people. I mean, they live it. They wear the clothes. I mean, everything they do. If you're a Harley Davidson person, everything you do is focused around that. And so, you know, if you look at the Harley Davidson, they have design excellence in everything they do. If it's their boots, their belt buckles, to their bikes. And they have design excellence and engineering superiority. I mean, everything is detailed, very carefully thought out. So we wanted to make sure that the building reflected that and that the interiors reflected that. You know, for instance, guys like Roger Penske, they have Roger has 6 bikes that he keeps over here, and we put a basement in this building because they store their bikes in the winter. So it's that kind of person that has an appreciation for it. And we went to the factory in Milwaukee. The original factory is about 100 years old, and it had the sawtooth roof. You know, if you know the history of the factories, Albert Kahn, in fact, developed the sawtooth roof as a way of bringing light into the middle of the factories because the factories had gotten so big. So we took that sawtooth roof idea, and you can see we have the same light monitors in the sawtooth roof. And the original factory was made from Glengarry brick. So we went to the Glengarry Brick Company. We said, hey, could you duplicate the brick that is on the original factory? And they did. They said, absolutely, we can. And this is the same brick that's used on the original Harley-Davidson factory. And these windows are called Hope's windows, and they're this very thin steel sash and glass windows, just like you would see in a factory as well. So we really tried to, you know, think about the important details to make this project very successful. And even when we get to the interiors, if you look at the way the railing is constructed, the way the bolts and the rivets are done for the columns and the beams, they're all very decorative and very intentional. And here you can see this sort of industrial aesthetic inside the building. And you see the light monitors up on top where the light comes right through, and it's just a very dramatic space, and become obviously a very successful building for our owner. Here's a view just looking down the storefront, and you can see the way the bikes just sort of line up. And by the way, most of the money is not made in the selling of the bikes, it's selling all the accessories. They make so much accessories. They make everything from ashtrays to Christmas decorations, and people go crazy over that stuff and they buy it, you know. There's even people who come in and don't even own bikes, but they just love the accessories and the clothing. And that's just a detail. You see the way the light comes right through those light monitors. You see the beam of light coming right through, and then the staircase becoming a very visual image next to it. In fact, Harley-Davidson did a joint venture with Ford Motor Company, and they put out a Harley-Davidson pickup truck a number of years ago, if you remember. And they shot commercials for that, and they did it here at this building. Ford did the commercials in front of this building. And then we also did a fair number of restaurant projects over the years. This happens to be a restaurant in downtown Birmingham called Forte. In fact, it's right next to the Birmingham Theater. So as I said, we had the success of the theater. And then we did Forte, a very, very popular restaurant for probably about 12 years. Unfortunately, it recently closed. Owners decided they eventually wanted to sell it, and another restaurant will be going in its place. But this restaurant won many awards and was on the cover of interior magazines, and it was very much an urban restaurant. Very sophisticated. It had a well-known chef by the name of Keith Famey. We did it for the Wisney family. Here you can see a revolving door, making it very sort of urban, and very big windows, and it's again an urban restaurant, and was a very, very popular place. That's a shot of the bar. It's sort of very organic and very busy, but we had a lot of fun. And one of the benefits of doing work in your own backyard is you get to go to these places and enjoy them and use them. So that's a nice perk that we always enjoy doing, and that's just another shot of the interiors. Talked about doing work with our own family and my father-in-law's family. We used to do the Merchant of Vino stores. My father-in-law is Eddie Jonah, and his sons, my brother-in-laws now, are Mark and Matt Jonah, and they've started the plum markets, and we've done 3 plum markets for them. In fact, we're going to do a plum market now in Chicago, right downtown. But these stores are very urban. They're about organics, and they're about gourmet foods, and as well as wine. And we really focus on the presentation of the food. Of course, we're trying to create architecturally a very nice space, but again, at the end of it all, it's about the food and selling the product and making sure that the product is front and center. And that's just an detail. That's the store on Maple and Lasser, and just a shot of the way the interiors are. We put skylights in, introduced lots of natural woods exposed in the store. The floors are just polished concrete. But again, the focus is the product, how to put the product front and center, how to display it. And we always talk about that. And you know, even the store we're working on right now in Chicago, I mean, we're moving stuff around all the time, you know, from aisle to aisle. What should the customer see next? When they turn the corner, what do they see? What, you know, what are their perceptions? It's all about seeing the product. You know, it's really trying to involve all of the senses, from the kind of music they play in the store, to the samplings and tastings they do. I mean, it really is all part of it. And then, of course, the prepared foods. This is a focal point where we had a pizza oven, and making sure that people right away see the activity of everything being made fresh. I think I'm running out of time here. I'm going to just very quickly, this is our own office. We're downtown Birmingham. So we put our money where our mouth is. This is our own building. We're up on the 3rd floor. It's become a great home for us, and we've got some tenants on the 1st floor and 2nd floor. That's my own office, and that's the front of our building. With that, I'll wrap it up, and if there's any questions, Don, I'm sorry I took so long.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. We do have the 7 o'clock lecture starting at 7 o'clock. I don't know if we have just a couple of minutes, or we're pretty tight for time, or can we have a couple of questions from question in the back?
Victor?
Yes.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate that you share your experience with our students here. What kind of advice would you give our students based on wonderful experience that you share with us tonight?
Well, I was, in the beginning, in the BL, I was talking about being a good listener and trying to really understand the objectives of the people you're doing business with. And if you can make them successful, you'll be successful. So as I said, I put myself in their shoes. And I still do that today. I always ask myself when an owner comes to us, why are you coming to me? Yes, they know maybe about our reputation or they've seen our work, but I always try to understand what is their agenda and what is their goal, because I want to make sure that they're successful. Because again, as I said, if they're successful, I'll be successful, or our firm will be successful. And that's the way we get our work. If we have a series of failures, we're not going to continue to get that work. So we want to make sure that we have successes, and that leads to the referrals of the next project for us.
Thank you.
How do you make that difficult transition from sort of professional services, which tends not to have high remuneration, to more contracting, developing type services, which does? For you,
well, I mean, for me, I felt it was sort of a natural progression, really, because as an architect, we really did those sort of things. Yeah, we were doing it for an owner and we were doing it as a service, but we understood construction and we understood financing and we understood budgets and tenants, and we really just felt, hey, we've done it for clients and they've been very successful. Can we start to do it for ourselves? And of course, we didn't do it overnight. We started with a project and we learned some lessons. And for instance, on the Merrill Park townhouses, I told you we learned that first lesson where we built all 7 townhouses, thought we had a home run. And then all of a sudden the economy went flat. So the lesson I learned was maybe don't build all 7 at the same time. Maybe build a couple and see how it goes, and build a couple more. And so I mean, there's all these lessons you learn trial and error.
I think, yeah, Glenn, you want to?
Just your opinion on this entrepreneurism. And you said earlier on you were born into an entrepreneurial family. You deal with Detroit like a monopoly board and that sort of thing. So you approached life with an entrepreneurial mindset in the beginning. Your firm became entrepreneurial, not practicing in a traditional way, but developing your own projects and that sort of thing. So the question is, for you, it was a cultural, family, innate thing. Is entrepreneurism in your mind more innate, or is it possible to learn it?
Can be taught.
Absolutely, I believe it can be taught. And I had probably an advantage of just being in that family environment, right? But it most definitely can be taught. And I think it's a mindset. It's really saying, do I want to step out of the box? Am I willing to take on a little bit of an extra challenge? And with that challenge, there may be a greater reward. And, it takes a certain amount of bravery, right, for people to do it. And still today, we have to be brave enough to...
Uncertainty.
That's right.
The fact is that it's there, it's very real, and how do you manage it? But what I got out of it is your opportunity recognition. You really nail it, and you really have a feeling. You recognize the opportunity, and you know what you do something about it.
Right.
And I certainly think in terms of entrepreneurial traits, and that's certainly, it's very, very important to
And
recognize
I
that.
think the other thing that's obvious is when the plans are foiled, like the market tanks, you turn a condo into a rental and you move ahead.
You have to be creative. You got to be on your feet. You got to think fast, right? I mean, that's all part of it.
It's an extension of design. You do that in your design.
Absolutely.
You go through the process, you run into challenges and difficulties, and you turn them around to make them work. You can do the same thing in that entrepreneurial spirit.
We're taught to be problem solvers,
That's
Ben,
right.
right? I mean, when you give a design problem, it's a problem, and you solve it. And so you do the same with the real estate market if it happens to be what you go into. And as an architect, that was just a natural progression for me to move into real estate. In Birmingham, just doing some small projects. And it was a way for us to kind of get started. And then from that, after about 2 years, and it was sort of, we all did it as a sort of a training ground. You know, we helped each other out. And after about 2 years, then we all went on and started our own firms. We'd all got registered then, and we said, you know, now's the time to start our own firms. And one of those gentlemen has a successful practice in Birmingham also. It's Chris Long. And the other gentleman, unfortunately, he has passed away. So Dave Sellards. And they were all classmates of mine. We all started here. We met here, and we started here.
We have a couple more questions.
It's just more of an observation. Victor, as an observer of your work and someone who has gone to your restaurants and has friends that have worked with you, I think it's important for the architecture and design students to realize, I think the kind of major point of your success is your holistic approach to design. That as an architect, interiors, every detail within the space is something that you acknowledge and becomes part of the whole package. And I want to compliment you on that.
Well, that's where I appreciate you saying that, and that's where I think we shine on our interiors. You know, it's not just enough, I think, as an architect, and I would just say this to everybody here, it's not enough just to do the shell of a building. Take the whole building, and you know what? You've got the skill set to do it. You don't have to have other professionals come in and take parts of the project away. Do it yourself. And again, sort of that bravery, you know, just like you know, take that entrepreneurial spirit. Tell that client, I can do it all. And you know what? You can do it all.
I think your partner has a word of wisdom.
I just wanted to say this is a tremendous turnout tonight, and Mark Farlow in our office and myself started a Facebook page for the firm, Victor Saroki and Associates, and if you're interested in liking it or following it, you can learn a lot more about the firm. We're pretty active on it.
I want to mention, this is a collaborative effort between the College of Architecture and the College of Engineering. I did not acknowledge Dean Grace being here, but thank you very much for being here. What it's all about is collaboration.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial mindset. We're fortunate here at Lawrence Tech, we really blessed to have so much going in the entrepreneurial world. The entrepreneurial lecture series is available on the Lawrence Tech Digital Entrepreneurial Library. All of these are being recorded. Victor, you get a copy of your screen test, and that'll be delivered to you in about a week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wally Wise on, Norman.